Over the years, we have certainly seen many companies struggle to grow as fast as the markets would like or as their shareholders would like. We've also seen plenty of companies, I'll air quote it, grow too fast and actually start to screw themselves up. So maybe there's some trick to getting it right. Well, we've got Tiffani Bova joining us on the phone right now. She is the author of Growth IQ, Get Smarter About the Choices That Will Make or Break Your Business. Tiffani, how are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. How are you today in hot Atlanta? Sounds like it's not so warm there today.
No, it's a little chilly today, but we're good. We're good. It's always hot in here, so we're good. Listen, I love this idea, especially because you focus on the book on something I am super passionate about, which we'll get to in just a second. But before we do that, can you just share a little bit of your background, Tiffani?
Yeah, I like to start by saying that I call myself a recovering seller, which is sort of a random way to describe myself. But I've been a practitioner on the sales, marketing, and customer service side, and then I became an academic for about 10 years, working at Gartner as a research fellow, sort of studying the market and watching how high-performing companies really grow and expand, as well as startups. You know, what's the best practices there? And now the last 3 years, I've been at Salesforce as the growth and innovation evangelist. So I've just had the wonderful pleasure of traveling around and meeting a ton of executives and companies, big and small, to understand how they go about growing their business.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, for myself, you know, I've interviewed so many businesses over the course of my career, and I've seen a lot of companies grow well, and I've seen a lot, maybe more, sort of try and fail. Like I said, either by growing too quickly and not staying true to their mission, those kinds of things, or just not growing fast enough to please their investors and shareholders. But, with your observations, you focus on something, as I said, that I am very passionate about, and that is the customer experience. Can you sort of talk about the connection between growth and customer experience?
Yeah, what's been interesting for me is it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, in research that we were doing, we started talking about the chief marketing officer spending more than the chief information officer, right? So the CMO spending more than the CIO as it related to technology. And while that was a very controversial and thought-provoking claim, what I really got out of that was why that was happening. And that was really the marketer trying to improve the way in which technology can engage with its customers, prospects, existing customers, and the broader shareholder community. And when I say that, I mean it could be the partners, it could be employees, it could be customers, it could be future customers, past customers, suppliers, right? Just how do I get better in making those engagements? And I think what started to happen at the same time as customer experience becoming more of a hot topic and a way for companies to grow was this employee experience as well. It's sort of the opposite side of that coin, that you can't have a great customer experience if your employees aren't happy. And so those two things coming together really led me to start saying that experience was the new product, that companies were competing with each other. Whether you're a taxi or an Uber, what is the competition? Is it really the ride from A to B, or is it the experience you have in a cab versus the experience you have in an Uber? So when I started saying experience became the new product, people really started to get interested in the topic. And so that's why it became such a heavy focus in the book.
It's so interesting because I feel like you're certainly, and I'm sure you would agree with me here, you're not the first person to suggest the importance of customer experience, but I like that you found a way to frame it that is getting a different kind of attention, because I still, and again, like you've done a lot more research than I have on this, but it still seems to me like even though I think we know this, how many companies are just getting it wrong?
Yeah. Well, so what's fascinating to me is it wrong? I get the point. And also that many say that, well, that's a big company problem. Like, I don't have someone who could be responsible for customer experience, or I don't have what we tend to call in the industry, right, a voice of the customer group that's watching the net promoter scores, or is watching customer satisfaction, or watching the things that would be telling us whether a customer has a good experience or not. So the small side of the spectrum of businesses, which is the majority of businesses across the United States, they're like, look, it's just overwhelming for me. Like I have a donut shop or a nail salon, or a small insurance company, and there's 5 of us. So me focusing on experience, I don't know how I can have impact there. And this is where I think they make the big mistake. And that's why I connected it to the employee experience as well. Because if people are really happy working there, right, it exudes sort of this experience people are going to have when they engage with your brand. And so ultimately, whether you're small or large, putting metrics behind what that means, customer experience, is the only way to get people to rally behind you as an owner or a CEO or a division head is trying to get people to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffani Bova on the phone right now. She is the author of Growth IQ. We're talking about how customer experience taps into that and fits into all of that. And so, look, I know you give some specific company examples, some good and some bad in the book. But interestingly enough, you talk about Starbucks, who I think of as overall pretty successful, and yet you use them as an example of, mistakes. Explain that.
Yeah, and that's one that everyone got very curious about. And the point of the book was there's 30 case studies, and so there was no way I could cover 30 companies, in a book. Otherwise, it would be, 7,000 pages
Right.
long. You know what I mean? It would just be ridiculous. So it's snippets in time. And so there was a point in time where Starbucks had lost their way. They'd overextended themselves from a growth perspective. One of your very first comments this morning, was really about, look, not all growth is good growth. And in that case, the growth for Starbucks started to impact the performance inside of the coffee houses. And so ultimately, the baristas weren't being trained. There were too many things being sold. They pivoted too much to food. And so the smell in a Starbucks was overwhelmingly food and not coffee. They had kind of lost their way as being held up as this gold standard for customer experience. And so that's why I use them, because I think people feel like even the big companies that have a lot of money won't fail there. And there's a great example of a company who was known for customer experience actually lost their way because they grew too quickly. So they brought Howard Schultz back as the CEO, and it was the very first thing he said. We grew too fast, and it had impact on what our brand promise was, which was a good cup of coffee and a great experience. So ultimately, that's why I use that as an example. It tells multiple stories there, right, that someone like a Starbucks can trip, but absolutely when you refocus, you can find your way back.
Yeah. Listen, Tiffani, the book is fascinating on a lot of levels, but I also, before I let you go, I want to mention that you're going to be here in Atlanta coming up in February. I think it's February 12th, if I have the date correct, for the summit, which is, of course, a huge event here put on by the Technology Association of Georgia, and doing a keynote. We're all looking forward to that. But I want to ask you in particular about this idea of customer experience from a B2B perspective, because I know a lot of people that will be attending are coming from tech companies, and a lot of those companies are B2B. So how important is customer experience in the B2B world?
Yeah, I tend to take a position, and I also do in the book, where I feel like the lines between B2C and B2B are gone, because all of us are individual consumers in our personal lives. And we don't leave that cape when we walk into our business life, right? It's not like we are no longer a consumer when we walk in. So we bring in with us these expectations of what we're now getting in all the examples people use in this new sort of digital era, right? Whether it's Uber or Airbnb or whomever it might be. In the consumer space, and what we've been able to do with technology and social and mobile and cloud and all this sort of collaboration that's happening. And so how do you replicate that in a B2B environment? Because the experience expectation of a customer, quote unquote, a consumer, even though it's in a business life, is no different. And in our research, from a Salesforce perspective, we went out and asked that question. And what's interesting is on the B2B side, their expectations on experience is actually higher than on the consumer side. So while people in the B2B world may poo-poo, right, the B2C statistics, you cannot separate the two anymore. So I actually call it B2E, which is business to everything, everyone, every experience, because then it eliminates this argument between the differences between the B2B and B2C.
Yeah, I obviously I read that part of the book, and I just wanted you to explain it because I'm so with you. I'm so with you
Yeah.
on all of that. You're so right. I've been saying, similar things for years, that you're still the same person when you get to work to make a purchasing decision. So I love that. Tiffani, this is going to be great. We're so excited to have you coming to Atlanta. The book is fabulous. Thank you for spending some time with us on the show today. The book, again, Growth IQ by Tiffani Bova. We'll post a link to it on our show notes.